Health systems around the world are just massive, incredibly complex beasts. And trying to change them, it can feel like you're trying to turn a battleship with a tiny canoe paddle. It just seems impossible. But what if there's a smarter way to do it? Let's dive into this fantastic policy brief from the World Health Organization that offers a new playbook for policymakers on how to actually make change happen.
So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at the immense pressure that's forcing these systems to change. Then, we'll unpack why it's so darn difficult. After that, we'll introduce a really powerful new way of thinking about a policymaker's job, lay out a practical toolkit for change, and finally, we'll see how it all fits together.
All right, so first things first, why the huge rush to transform everything right now? Well, it turns out that health systems are basically caught in a vice grip, being squeezed from two different directions, and that pressure is only getting more intense.
This slide really tells the whole story, doesn't it? On one side, you have healthcare costs just climbing and climbing. An average of 8.5% of GDP in the WHO European region back in 2020 is a huge slice of the pie. And on the other side, our populations are getting older, which naturally means more people needing more care, especially for long-term conditions. Put those two things together, and you get this unsustainable squeeze that's forcing everyone to admit we have to fundamentally rethink how we do things.
And that right there is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? It's what keeps health ministers and policymakers up at night. You just can't keep plugging away with the same old methods and hope for a different outcome. It's this urgency that really forces us to tackle the core challenge of transformation head-on.
So, if everybody agrees that change is necessary, why is it so incredibly hard to pull off? Well, the answer is baked into the very DNA of health systems themselves. You see, you can't just send out an order from the top and expect this massive, complex system to just obey.
Just think about it for a second. A health system isn't a machine with levers and buttons. It's more like a living ecosystem. You've got doctors, nurses, hospital administrators, patient advocates, insurance companies, regulators. The list goes on. And every single one of them has their own goals and motivations. If you push on one part of this system, you might get a totally wild, unexpected reaction somewhere else.
Right, so that old way of thinking, top-down, command and control, it just breaks down in this kind of environment. It's too stiff, and people naturally push back against it. So what this report argues for is a huge shift in mindset. You move from commanding change to enabling it. Instead of trying to force the system into a new shape, you create the right conditions for it to adapt and evolve organically, from the inside out.
And this brings us to what I think is a really brilliant metaphor. Instead of seeing the policymaker as a military commander shouting orders, we should see them as a gardener, someone who isn't forcing the plants to grow, but is carefully tending the soil, providing water and sunlight, and creating the perfect environment for things to flourish on their own.
This quote from the report just nails it. The goal isn't to micromanage every single action, it's to build up the system's own ability to adapt and improve. You're giving the people inside the system the power and the tools to find and create their own solutions. So you see, the key is you're cultivating change, not dictating it.
Okay, so what does this gardening actually look like in the real world? It pretty much boils down to two big jobs. First, you've got to provide clear leadership. That means setting a vision, a North Star, so everyone knows where you're all heading. And second, you have to make sure that everyone, at every level, has the resources they need to make that journey.
Which leads us to the next logical question. What are these essential resources? Well, the policy brief gives us a super practical 4-part toolkit that every policymaker, every gardener needs to have in their shed.
These are the 4 big levers you can pull, and it's not about just picking one. It's about using all 4 of them in a smart, strategic way. You need the right funding, the right people with the right skills, the right technology, and, crucially, the right information to make good decisions.
Let's start with the big one, money. If you want to get funding, especially when budgets are tight, you have to learn to speak the language of finance ministries. That means you don't frame investments as just costs. You frame them as solutions. You have to show exactly how this money will improve health, how it benefits society as a whole, prove that you'll use it wisely, and show that it's sustainable for the future.
Next up, people. And let me be clear, this is a total non-negotiable. You can have all the money and fancy tech in the world, but it means nothing if your workforce is burned out, underskilled, or just too small. Seriously, investing in the people on the front lines, their training, their skills, their well-being, that is the absolute bedrock of any real lasting change.
Now, when we talk about technology,
The trick isn't to just chase after the newest, shiniest gadget. It's all about being smart. Tools like Health Technology Assessment, or HTA, are absolutely vital here. They act like a filter, giving you a systematic way to figure out if a new drug or device actually provides real value for patients, for the system, and for the budget.
And finally, information. You know, one of the most powerful ways to get change to bubble up from within the system is to arm professionals with solid evidence. Clinical guidelines aren't just a set of rigid rules. They're tools that empower clinicians to make the best possible decisions. They tap into that internal motivation by showing a clear, evidence-based way to give patients better care.
Okay, so we have this new vision of the policymaker as a gardener, and we have the 4 essential tools in our toolkit. So how do we actually put it all together into a plan that makes change happen?
The whole process really works in 3 stages. First, you figure out what the actual problem is, using hard data and talking to people on the ground. Second, you develop a strategy. You look for new ideas, you test them out on a small scale. And third, you implement and you monitor. This is where you bring in that sustained leadership and the entire toolkit we just discussed to really drive it home. And it's not a one-time thing. It's a constant cycle of learning, adapting, and improving.
If you only take one single thing away from our discussion today, please let it be this. The secret to changing a huge, complex system isn't about having all the answers or controlling every little detail. It's about being that gardener. It's about setting a clear, inspiring direction and then putting all your focus on providing the resources, the money, the people, the tech, and the information that the system itself needs to evolve and grow.
This framework is a really powerful way to think about making change happen. But of course, every health system has its own unique challenges. So I'll leave you with a question to think about. In the health systems that you're most familiar with, what do you think is the single biggest barrier holding back real transformation? Is it leadership, money, people,